Hello, Dr. Afaf. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Yes, morning for you, afternoon for us. Dr. Hakpana, could you also put your video on? We're just going to start.
Hello, hello
Hello,
everybody.
Salam.
How are you?
Good, thank you. Hope you're well.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks.
Pleasure. Um, I think we will start. Two of our speakers are just going to join us as well. So, Assalamu alaikum and good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the Center for Afghanistan, Middle East, and Africa at the Institute of Strategic Studies, in collaboration with our partners, that is the Middle East Monitor in London, I welcome you to today's webinar on the shifting dynamics in Palestine and the broader Middle East, as we continue to witness an alarming escalation in violence and, of course, regional instability. Now, what has been unfolding in Gaza since October 7th, 2023, is unparalleled in its intensity, brutality, and, of course, scope. The relentless bombardment of Gaza by Israel, which is tantamount to genocide, has claimed more than 45,000 innocent Palestinian lives, with the vast majority of them being women and children, reflecting not only the disregard for Palestinian lives, but also a broader pattern of impunity that has emboldened Israel to expand its military aggression beyond Gaza and into the region, as we have seen in Iran, Lebanon, and most recently in Syria. Now, the ongoing genocide in Palestine remains a pressing humanitarian crisis with far reaching consequences, resonating not only across the region, but also throughout the global community, as we continue to see. Now, amidst Israel's ongoing aggression, a significant shift in the international legal and political landscape has been seen with South Africa's bold initiative at the ICJ, along with the ICC's arrest warrant for the Israeli continue to unfold. They have the potential to reshape the international order, challenging the legitimacy of global institutions and forcing a reckoning on the selective enforcement of justice. So, to discuss these developments and, of course, their broader implications, today with the Middle East Monitor, we have a very distinguished panel of experts who will provide critical insights into the very unfortunate ongoing crisis and its far reaching effects on the regional as well as international system. Today, we are joined by Dr. Afaf Jaberi, who is a senior lecturer and the co-director of the Center for Social Justice and Change at the University of East London, United Kingdom. Thank you once again for joining us. We have with us our very own Dr. Dawood Abdullah, who is the director of the Middle East Monitor. We are also joined by Dr. Motamer Amin from the Department of Political Science, University of Cairo in Egypt. We have with us Dr. Jafar Hakpana, who is a research assistant at the University of Tehran. We will also shortly be joined by Ambassador Madikiza, who's the former South African ambassador to Pakistan, and Dr. Ahmed Kuroglu, distinguished faculty member, Department of Political Science and International Relations at the Istanbul University. But before we begin this discussion, I would like to hand over the floor to the Director General, Institute of Strategic Studies, Ambassador Sohail Mahmood, for his remarks.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you, Samna Khan. Let me begin by welcoming all the distinguished speakers who have joined us for this important webinar. Their vast experience and insights into this issue would enrich our understanding and contribute to better awareness. A special thanks to Dr. Dawood Abdullah and Memo for this collaborative effort. Distinguished participants, it is over 15 months that the relentless Israeli military onslaught against Gaza commenced after the Hamas attack of 7th October 2023. So far, nearly 47,000 Palestinians have been martyred and over 109,000 wounded, a large number of them children and women. Reprisals by Israeli security forces have also taken place in the West Bank, while the illegal settlers there perpetrate their own acts of violence against Palestinians at will. The desecration of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Qibla Awwal, occurs as a regular feature. As UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres had pertinently noted at the outset, that the 7th October did not happen in a vacuum. Indeed, there had been a more than 7 decades long history of illegal occupation, brutal repression, marginalization and dispossession, and the denial of the Palestinians' right to self determination. The right to armed resistance of any people living under illegal or foreign occupation is recognized by international law. It is a travesty to characterize it as terrorism. The current dynamics in Palestine have profound implications for the international system and a stable global order. First and foremost, we see that there is a contemptuous disregard of international law, principles of the United Nations Charter, and basic norms of state behavior. The so-called rules-based order has no foundation left whatsoever in the context of Palestine, and its proponents are fully exposed. A genocidal war is being waged against a people in full global glare, and there is literally no restraint on the perpetrator, either from the law or any relevant state or international institution. Secondly, impunity has acquired a new meaning. Beyond the Palestinians, the primary victims of the most egregious war crimes and crimes against humanity, the recognized sanctuaries like schools, hospitals, and others in combat zone, protected under international law, are being deliberately targeted and attacked. The UN Refugee Agency, the NGOs doing humanitarian work, the individual relief workers, all are being relentlessly pursued. The pronouncements of the ICJ are being denounced. The arrest warrants issued by the ICC are flayed, and the UN Secretary General is being brutally smeared. Clearly, this diabolical campaign does not appear to be stopping anywhere or at anything. Thirdly, the institutions entrusted with primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security remain stymied. The divided Security Council is unable to act on the most grievous danger to world peace and an existential threat to the Palestinian people. Not just that, The zone of conflict continues to be expanded by Israel to engulf Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and possibly Iran. An already volatile Middle East is potentially facing a volcanic eruption. Nothing short of a miracle can save the situation. Fourthly, deeper uncertainty will be injected as the second Trump administration assumes office later this month. Its blatantly partisan approach earlier, its resolve to closely pursue the Abraham Accords, and its notions about a new security architecture in the region portend further developments of far reaching consequences. There will be a massive churn and a lot of disorder before any semblance of order emerges in the region. Notwithstanding these grim trends and prognoses, there are some signs of hope as well. The initiative taken by South Africa to put a legal spotlight on Israeli genocide is one. The diplomatic recognition of Palestinian state by several European countries is another. The prudent regional response to avoid a larger conflagration is yet another. The conscientious role of the UN General Assembly in the face of the Security Council's dereliction is still another one. But obviously, much more needs to be done, especially by the Arab League and the OIC. There is a favorable sentiment on the Western Street and across the global South and in the like minded major powers. This needs to be leveraged for positive outcomes. What we need urgently is a comprehensive ceasefire, a safe environment for assured humanitarian assistance, and some way to get back to negotiations for ensuring Palestinian statehood. As has been repeatedly emphasized from this platform, there can be no peace in the Middle East without justice for the Palestinians. With these remarks, I welcome you all again and wish fruitful deliberations during the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. We will begin the discussion, and I would first like to hand over the floor to Dr. Jabiri. You have the floor.
Thank you very much for the invite and for this important discussion. And I would like to start first to say that it is important to acknowledge what's going on in Palestine, that it has not started on the 7th of October, it started 7 decades ago. And that's not only because what has happened to Palestine in 1948, but also, as we see today, the impunity, the full protection of the Zionist regime that has established in 1948 continues. And it is in Nakba in 1948, which I would like to introduce the work of Constantin Zurayq. And Constantin Zurayq is an Arab nationalist intellectual. He was the first one to coin the term Nakba. And in terming the Nakba, he didn't mean the Palestinian catastrophe only. He didn't mean the killing of thousands of Palestinians in 1948. He didn't only mean the displacement of over 800,000 Palestinians from their land and establishing a new home for another people on Palestine. But also he stressed on the idea that it was the Nakba of the world in turning the world order into upside down. What he meant by that, by creating and by denying the Palestinian right for self-determination, by denying Palestinian freedom, by also denying the Palestinians the right to human rights, the system that has been established in post-World War II has actually failed before it even has started. And that is the catastrophe. And that is the Nakba for the world. And because of that Nakba for Constantin Zurayq, and I build on his work, it's not only for Palestinian. And what this means, it means that we all in the world has a responsibility to go back in time and to correct what has happened in that time by denying Palestinian their rights. The world has denied the international order and the human rights system and the democratic and the democracy that has called for to actually be implemented anywhere else. So this is basically why when we look at the case of Palestine, we don't look at it in terms of only in terms of the destruction and killing that is happening to Palestinians, because this destruction and killing, it means something in relation to the continuity of imperialism in the world as a whole. And I want also to refer to Biden's speech yesterday. If you heard the speech, you will get a few messages that are important to actually unpack and analyze. The first message was for the world, and he explicitly in some statements said, like, almost without using the word imperialism, that because usually imperial powers do not acknowledge themselves as such. But he almost said that United States empire and imperialism is almost complete. There are just a few things United States need to deal with, which he named Iran, Russia, North Korea, and everything else and that would establish the US domination over the world. So this was a message to the world, and also a message to the next American administration of Trump, not to ruin this, because this achievement is important for the continuity of American imperialism. And the messages to the Middle East weren't before even clearer than what he said yesterday. In his message of saying that he established, or United States established, a coalition of 20 countries to defeat Yemen. He meant that United States not anymore in the place where it has to sacrifice the American soldiers to defeat any regime in the country. While in the region now, there is a coalition from these countries themselves who can do this for the United States. And when he mentioned Yemen, he did not mention why Yemen actually started the disruption, what he called disruption in the Red Sea, and that it would have taken just stopping the war in Gaza, the genocidal war in Gaza, for Yemen to stop, but it needed to take a coalition of 20 countries to come together and to establish the United States power. Another coalition he mentioned is the coalition against Iran, that compromise of countries in the region. And again, this is another message that United States now have full domination over the Middle East region, where it can actually do whatever it wants without any justifications, without any red lines, and without any boundaries. And this message was very clear for the Middle East region, particularly for the Arab states, who clearly from his speech have no more leverage, or they can use any leverage they have, like the oil, which United States have always built its policy and strategies on the Middle East based on it, like oil and domination. This is the policy of United States over the Middle East since the 70s. So basically, the messages that we got from Biden in the end of his administration, and taking the genocidal war, 15 months of genocidal war against Gaza, as something to establish the authoritarian power of the world, and United States as an imperial power. This is a very scary message, not just for Palestinians. These messages from Biden yesterday, they threatened the whole world. Basically, what he was saying, that United States can do whatever with its partners and alliances to any country, and it would allow allies, important allies, and there was differentiation also in his speech between allies, where Israel is the main ally. So basically, allies like Israel can enjoy the full protection, immunity, and do whatever they want when whatever they want. And that was the message that after 15 months of genocidal war against Palestinian. His message to the Palestinian was that of blaming yourself. You are the only one to be blamed. When he mentioned what happened in Gaza, he said the war that was started by Hamas and caused all the suffering for the Palestinian, and Palestinians have been suffering for a very long time. So basically, we come to understand this victim blaming aspect within his message, but also it's a threatening message where he tells Palestinians that if you dare to resist, if you dare to have the right that has been established by international law for any people under occupation, which is to resist occupation, is not applicable to you. And again, this is not a new message. That was the message that established by the defeat of international law from its inception, by not guaranteeing Palestinian the right to self-determination and freedom they have been asking. So basically, what we see is American foreign policy at its best in terms of its imperial power and domination, and the ways in which those countries in the region and all over the world, they are conducting themselves right now. So not just the United States is conducting them, it is them conducting themselves at the favor of United States. What this make the Arab regimes in the country, the political distance between the people in the region and their leaders have never been greater. And this particular situation could bring uncertainty in the region, but also could open some possibilities. Because if you have been to any country in the region, you will see the outrage. Although there aren't many protests, as someone would expect in the face of this genocidal war, but people are really burning from the inside. And also people have the evidence just in front of them. They are watching themselves being killed. They are also watching the level of destruction can happen to them, because in the messages that we have got for the last 15 months, that there are two people in the world: those who are valued and they can have the full protection, and those who have no value, those who can be killed, those who can their history can be destroyed, they can completely be erased without any red lines or any boundaries. So basically, when an Arab person look at what's happening in Palestine, this is what they see. They see themselves with no value. And that's what makes the outrage and the anger and the despair huge in the region. What that will get us, we actually don't know, because it's all people reactions throughout history is different. But certainly one reaction of people in the face of injustice and in the face of imperial power has always been consistent through history, that nowhere in the history people have watched injustice and they have remained silent for a much longer time. So certainly this is bring some possibilities in terms of what will happen in the Arab streets, maybe not soon, but also we don't know the period, but what's going on in the region in terms of how people are feeling. So and discrepancy and in no way they relate to the actions and behavior of their leaders, that bring one possibility of something that might happen in the street of the Arab region. At the international level, as the ambassador stated, there were also some hopes, because although international law has been sort of defeated by US veto, but also there has something happened that hasn't happened before, which is to challenge the US power at the international level, whether it's through the South African case at the ICJ, or even the case of the ICC arrest warrants against Netanyahu and his defense minister. And also, we can see that there are some citizens of the world, they are taking the international law in their hands. And this is actually brings a lot of power to the hands of people. When you have the ability to use international level at your country. So you have that, because international law is not just about United Nations. International law is any action that it could be taken at the law, even in the national courts, in favor of other people in other parts of the world. And we have seen these cases are increasing in different parts of the world. The investigation of soldiers who committed these crimes. These are all important initiatives, and they should continue, and they bring some sort of hope, because people are not just behaving the way United States want them to behave, which is to acknowledge that US is the dominant power and we are passive citizens of the world and we cannot do anything about it. So basically what is going on regarding internationally is the realization of the people of the world, particularly in the West, which hasn't been the case before, that the narrative of Palestinian, the injustice made to Palestinian, has been finally realized by, I know that's a huge number of people, they still haven't kind of come to that conclusion, but watching the genocide on the screen daily, and despite the media trying to kind of distort the narrative and show that Palestinians are the terrorists and Israel has the right to self-defense, and all of these people have started to make conclusions to themselves. And this by and itself is an important step, because I believe the next few years, the power should be in the hands of the people, because regimes everywhere in the region, some regimes have taken some steps, like in Ireland, in Belgium, in Latin America, but these are not enough steps. More is needed, particularly when the ICJ case clearly put a lot of power in the hands of states to do something about what they called plausible genocide that is taking place in Palestine, and states have done yet the minimum. So the power is in the hands of people right now, and I believe the people are going to use this power in different ways, as I said, particularly in investigating cases of war crimes, and continue to protest for Palestinians. I would stop here in these remarks, and I'm looking forward for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jabiri. I would now like to hand over the floor to Dr. Abdullah.
Thank you very much, Amina. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Over the last 15 months, we've seen two diametrically opposed scenarios emerging, both in the region and internationally. On the one hand, we had the re-emergence of the Palestinian issue on the international agenda. Prior to October the 7th, 2023, very few people spoke about the 17-year blockade of Gaza. Palestine was ignored, as it were, in the international arena. And all of it was very much focused upon what was happening in Ukraine, or normalization with Israel, or Iran's nuclear program. Palestine was ignored. As a result of what happened in Gaza, and of course in the West Bank, the discourse on Palestine has returned to the top of the international agenda. And this is something which was manifested in the marches we've seen across the world, you know, from Indonesia right across the Middle East to Morocco. On the other hand, what we've seen is the isolation, the reinforcement of Israel's status as a pariah state coming to the fore because of its actions, because of the genocide. We've seen this scenario also coming to the fore. Beyond this, there has been a revival of the debate on human rights and international humanitarian law. Westerners very often, when faced with a crisis that relates to the Middle East or the Islamic world, will speak about their values, their so-called superior values. The truth is, these values were codified in 1948 in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and they do not belong to one people, you see, or one region in the world. They are universal. And what Palestine has triggered is a debate about who these laws really should apply to. Justice, equality, freedom from oppression and torture. Every people, as the Charter of the United Nations assert, as well as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, every people are entitled to freedom, to liberty, to justice, and happiness. So that is one of the consequences of the events in Palestine. Then there is the issue of humanitarian law, which has been flouted, as we heard from previous speakers over the years. What we've seen is the need to implement the principle of universal jurisdiction, that there are some crimes which are so heinous, like torture, like genocide, like war crimes. These crimes can be prosecuted even by states that are not signatories to the Rome Statute. So and this is not something new. We've seen it prior to the creation of the ICC, when people like Augusto Pinochet was arrested in the United Kingdom for war crimes and torture committed in Chile. We've seen it against people like Mengistu Haile Mariam when he went to South Africa and a warrant was issued for his arrest. This is why today we have, warrants being or cases being brought against these war criminals, Israeli war criminals in various parts of the world. So the fact of the matter is, events in Palestine has created a historical opportunity to revisit the question of the Security Council, for example, and reform of the United Nations Security Council. This is an old debate, and many countries in Africa, in Latin America, have been calling for this. Even Kofi Annan himself, before he left office, spoke about the need for this reform. It is not so much a question of the veto. Is it necessary to have a veto anyway? These are questions that are now being brought to the table and revisited. And the African Union, for example, has set up a special committee to look into the question of reform of the Security Council. So that is one hand. The other challenge that has emerged as a result of events in Palestine is the question of Israel's membership of the United Nations. And so countries like Malaysia and Turkey have, initiated efforts to isolate, not only isolate, but to suspend this entity from the United Nations. And this is not unprecedented. South Africa itself was suspended from the United Nations in 1974 because of its apartheid policies. We've seen in Palestine today the creation of an apartheid system worse than what happened in South Africa. And the South Africans have all attested to this, that what is happening in Palestine is worse. So the need for, you see, the application of the Convention Against Apartheid has become even more urgent today. So this is why you see countries like Malaysia and Turkey spearheading this effort to isolate and to suspend Israel from the world body. Apartheid, you see, as we've seen, is a crime against humanity, and it is in this context this campaign has been launched. So, to conclude, I think that the question of Israel's isolation is one that would be reinforced as we go forward from here, and that the question of Palestine and the Palestinian rights to self-determination will also gather momentum in the months ahead. These are the few remarks I'd like to make at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abdullah. We now turn to Egypt, where we have Dr. Mutamir Amin. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see me because I'm.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for the invitation and for this wonderful session. I actually wanted to start from a different point. I wanted to start from the future challenges, because being in this region, which is so close to the Arab-Israeli conflict for so long, you understand that everything, every possible thing that should be said have been already said. For some reason, it is not working out. You land on a deaf ear, and the other side don't understand or don't want to understand. So probably this is not because they don't get it, but it's because they have something else in mind. And this is being revealed in this current Gaza conflict like never before. When the war started in 7th of October 2023, everybody was thinking like the traditional confrontation, which will somehow end with some kind of logic, which will bring back I wouldn't say peace, but I would say certain kind of end, which everybody expected with the first ceasefire, which was in November 2023. Back then, aspirations were high. Everybody thought that maybe this thing will not continue, but actually continued for so long, revealing that what the Israeli government was saying all the time was not really a joke. I mean, they were referring to biblical verses, Torah verses. They were referring to religious war. They were imposing certain kind of pictures on the Palestinian side, so you can actually get to see the Palestinians as demons, and that they are not fighting the current war we see. They are fighting something else, which is like goes back to whatever their belief is. But this would have been an internal thing if it did not actually land with the current with the upcoming American administration, meaning that President Trump, which will be inaugurated in just a few days from now, is supporting this project, this campaign, which is basically the Greater Israel. And this is where the problem started to clarify a little further than the usual. The thing about Greater Israel, this is something that we have all known, read about, and we understand from the literature, but you have never thought to see it implemented in front of our eyes in this clear, using this kind of clear policy. It is not like some kind of academic talking, or like somebody who's like writing a fiction talking about like what will happen in the Palestinian land from the Israeli point of view. This is Israeli government backed by American will, and the new president is already talking about Israel is very small and teeny, and we need to expand it. This is where I think we need to start. Why we start at this point? Because it explains that whatever kind of logic peace process, the regular development of like what we will consider as a common sense is not there. The conflict is not stopping. The conflict which started in Gaza is like expanding regionally to include all the axis of resistance. Now Syria is turning to um, another land of another area of dispute, which looks like what happened in Iraq in 2003. I mean, if you follow the pattern in Iraq and what happened in the region after Iraq 2003, the invasion, of course, the American invasion of Iraq in 2003, and then you will see like, okay, it became chaos everywhere, and then you got all the projects which is talking about something new, the new Middle East, the chaos theory, the new regional order, blah, blah, blah. So everything new came from that 2003 invasion, and we are now looking like there is something new happening in Syria, which looks like what has been happening in Iraq since 2003, which is, of course, has a huge regional impact on stability, on the borders, on the ethnicities, on the minorities, on every possible thing you can think of. So putting this all together, this is not only also regional, we also have international players, because we see that what's happening in Syria is not going to stop at Syria, or it will not be up to the Syrian people to decide. We all see that there are other regional and global powers playing in Syria, and it has have a great impact on the events which are unfolding in Syria. Back to Palestine, with the idea of greater Israel, with what we see with the administration, Trump administration, upcoming Trump administration, we see that the idea of greater Israel is not a joke. This is something that you are working on, and you are using plans, you are unfolding your plans, you are using your capacity, you are bringing global power to actually, like the US, to implement this plan. So, for example, in Egypt, because we have been living so close to this conflict, and we understand very well these kind of intentions, we expect that something would happen on the borders all the time. And suddenly, in the past couple of weeks, you find that there is a lot in the Israeli media talking about the Egyptian army is trying to build barricades in Sinai. They are making Sinai they are arming Sinai and building defenses to stop any potential like I wouldn't say conflict, but like threat coming towards them. So what is the problem that Egypt is building defenses in Sinai? I mean, you are anticipating that you want also to take Sinai. Of course, they don't want to take Sinai in the regular sense of like 1967 war, but they want to end the problem in Gaza through pushing the Palestinians outside of Gaza towards Sinai. This is why they don't talk about Egypt. They talk all the time about Sinai and Egypt as if they are different things. But this kind of rhetoric we've seen from the Israelis for so many years. Based on that, we understand that the idea of greater Israel is something which is really a threat. It is not only, again, it is not only something which is in the literature that by some sort of academic or fictitious writer. This is a political agenda. This is a political plan which is endorsed by right-wing government and endorsed by the Trump administration. Putting this together, what will happen in Palestine? It will be more marginalized and it will be more under pressure. And now the game is not, in my opinion, the game is not about like like how only to settle the idea of Gaza, but it's also about West Bank. And yeah, let's push the West Bank away towards Jordan, and then let's see how this will be part of the new Abrahamic Accord and the new settlement, which is expected between Saudi Arabia and Israel. I wouldn't have believed if somebody was telling me like a year ago that the idea of normalization will still be alive today. Simply because the amount of atrocities, the genocide, everything horrible we see in the war going on in Gaza with the daily killing, live killing in front of everybody, which is being transmitted globally from all possible streams, including news outlets. I wouldn't have thought that the idea of normalization is still alive, but it is still alive. And this is telling you something that the forces which is planning for the Greater Israel thing are actually influential even in the level of the Gulf, which is keeping the project up and kicking, although of all what we have said so far or seen so far. So how this will reflect on the Palestinian cause, I think it will be more marginalized, more under pressure, and hopefully it will not transfer into the West Bank, which could eventually end up with something like what we have seen in Gaza. I don't know what the Arabs would wait for, but we are not active at the moment. We are reactive. Unfortunately, we are not even proactive. The players are regional like Turkey and Iran. The players are global like US and partially EU. But also you can see that in NATO, sorry, in Russia, they have also lost a big deal. They have lost their presence in Syria in the way it was before the December 2024. They have lost something also more important, which is the Syrian regime, which was basically a very close ally. And now they are, their presence in the Syrian coast is doubtful. They are moving to Libya, which is transferring the problem to another Arab country, which we don't know what will happen there, because you also have more or less the same fictions which are taking over Syria. They are in fight in Libya as well. So basically, the global game or the global competition between US on one hand and Russia on the other hand, which gained a new momentum in Syria after the fall of the Bashar regime, which is again having a reflection on the Palestinian cause. Hamas is more isolated, although they are still holding their ground very bravely in Gaza. I couldn't believe that they were lost all this time and they will be able to fight. But after 100 days of land operation in northern Gaza, not the south, in northern Gaza, they are still able to resist on a daily basis and make heroic attacks against the Israelis. So I think this is summing up my point. I'm afraid that it is about time to actually talk about that idea of Greater Israel as a real and imminent threat. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amin, for a very interesting take on the current conflict. We now turn to Iran. Dr. Jafar Hakbana, you have the floor. Can you unmute yourself?
Is it okay?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Oh. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank you from ISSI and CAMER, and especially special thanks from Dr. Amina Khan for all her support and facilitation. One aspect of dynamics in Palestine impacting the regional and international system is related to Syrian crisis. What is going in Syria not only in Palestine issues, but also will affect on regional security in Levant and in Middle East. For a better understanding of what has happened in Syria and what is going in future, I want to share my ideas with you about comparative studies in Afghanistan case. Uh, and have a simulation with these two cases. I think there are many similarities between uh, these two cases and the managing of these crises. Uh, as we know, both of these countries suffer from lack of powerful state. There are some failed states in both countries. The legitimacy of crisis is has been very important for creating more domestic tensions in two countries. There has been a dichotomy and reinforcing ethno-religious area and lingo cleavages in Syria and Afghanistan, and there has been also interventions of uh, by many of some superpowers and regional powers in both countries, especially United States has been affected in both in Afghanistan and in Syria. Iran again has been one of the key factors in Syria and Afghanistan. Another similarity is a role and crucial role of some non-state actors, some Islamic and extremist groups that basically have been organized in Afghanistan and then enter to Syrian crisis. Some groups like Al Qaeda and Daesh nowadays are active in both sides, and there is some exchanges between two sides. In future of Syrian crisis, we should note about what is happening in Afghanistan, because Afghanistan nowadays again is a fragile state. There is no total sovereignty. Many of some non-state actors are active there and reorganize and finance and are able to be active in all of the other countries, especially in their neighborhoods in Pakistan and Iran. But the main uh, distance for them nowadays in Syria, and some countries like Turkey are active for and use as have created a trajectory for transferring many of these extremist groups. We have heard about the role of the some American organizers that transferred these jihadist groups to Syria, and they have played a crucial role in tackling against Bashar al-Assad regime. Of course, there are some differences. Yes, Syria is close to Israeli borders and Mediterranean Sea, and I totally agree with what our counterpart from the Egypt mentioned and comparison between the current situation in Syria and what we have witnessed in Iraq after U.S. invasion in 2003. Based on it, I think there in future we will have more chaos in Syria. Some Islamic groups that have been trained and organized and financed from Afghanistan will be more active in Syria, in close to Israeli borders, uh, and it will be for regional security patterns. Back to Palestine Israeli dispute, I think uh, based on these comparative studies, we may have some estimations. I think in horizon of recent development in Syria, Many of these Islamic groups have been more active and they try to have more support in Palestine issues and supporting Hamas because uh, it means the more support from Hamas creates more legitimacy and more domestic social base for them. It doesn't matter that in which countries they are more active, but they want to create more loyalty among their supporters by pretending that we are the real supporters of the Hamas and Palestinian rather than some Arab states that they are pursuing some compromise pacts with Israel. Uh, Another impact is that again more and more the regional security arrangement will be penetrative. The interfering of superpowers in the region will be more unfortunately, and it means that we will not able to create any security arrangement based on our needs in the region. And when we have more tackle against the statism in the region, it means this security arrangement will be more vulnerable, not only from interfering of superpowers in the like United States from outside the region, but also from the influential role of these non-state actors. Many of these ethnic groups, religious extremist groups have been more active, and we will have a deteriorated situation in our region. Uh, it means that the idea of two-state solutions will be weakened and it is too difficult to implement it in this situation. There will be a gap between two levels, regional levels and international levels, like what we have had in Afghanistan cases. At that time, during 2003 until now, uh, the regional powers like Iran and Pakistan have had their own concerns toward the Afghanistan issues in reverse of what United States and NATO were following there. In this new case in Syria and Palestine issues, again we will have this gap. It means that even between some U.S. allies in the region, like Turkey and Saudi Arabia, there had been more rivalries and competitions, and they were not able to accept what United States wants to order them, especially during the new administration in White House and President Trump will follow some offshore balancing policies and strategies in the region. It means that the United States will not invest and there will be no investments and no direct interventions, but trying to push all these supports to be to more active, and finally there will be more weekend of some Arab state countries. They should spend more and more. Some countries like Iran and Turkey, and the main winner of these uh, events at short period of time might be Israel, but I think in future Israel will be more vulnerable because of rule of some non-state actors in the region and more chaos in the regions. As far as we have this rule of and logic of playing in our region, that will the war will not be a taboo and war will be a solution. It means even Israel, despite all of superiorities in military, will be more vulnerable in the region, and the chaos will be more continuous. Thanks for having me and listening us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Hakpana. We now turn to South Africa, where we have Ambassador Medikiza, who will give us his views. Ambassador Medikiza? You have to unmute yourself, please.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
First of all, Program Director, I must apologize for appearing like this. Seemingly, I was considering time as if I'm in Pakistan. So to me, I still had many hours until 5:30 South African time. Can you imagine that? How long it has taken me to move away from Pakistan psychologically. Having said that, Ambassador Khalid Mahmoud, Chairman of the Board of Directors of ISSI, Ambassador Sohail Mahmoud, Director General ISSI, dear guests, looking at this topic and thinking about it deeply and how our big powers and particularly their ally Israel, I could not but think that somehow Israel and her partners expect the gazelle to hand over its throat to the lion by merely seeing the beast. It seems Israel and her allies do not understand that such behavior is not only impossible, but nature negates it. By so saying, I'm suggesting that peace will never see the day of light in Palestine, Israel, until the right of the gazelle to protect itself and get itself to peace and safety is understood. In this analogy, moderator, I do not suggest that we are living in primitive times, but emphasize the point that we are in modern world indeed, with recognition of human rights and the rule of law. However, some of us are conducting themselves still as primitive people. Despite the Enlightenment, novel global institutions, continental, regional, and religious-based international organizations, and countries and people, all these formations are challenged and shaken to the core by the dynamics of Palestine. The ICJ genocide case, as an example, brought by the Republic of South Africa and all supporting countries and organizations, has the playing field going to the future of conduct in conflict shaken to the core. Most importantly, the voice of the Palestinian people has in many folds been amplified. It has empowered countries of the South in particular. It has changed the course of the dynamics that take place at the UN. It has afforded, as in the words of Ambassador Sohail, a historical opportunity for the countries of the Middle East to unite, but that remains an opportunity. Once again, it has rekindled the knowledge and support for the cause of the Palestinian people. Even though the carnage is still raging, I think these dynamics represent a dialectical evolution of the world governance system, where small and less powerful countries are enabling themselves to challenge world powers. I see a brighter future. I see a storm before the calm. There is, of course, a lot of work to be done. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Medikiza. We now turn to Turkey, where we have Dr. Ahmet Kuroglu, who will give us his views. You have the floor.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much having me. for this wonderful conference and brilliant speakers whom give their speech in different sides of Palestine or Gaza issue. All were very good and state important issues. And I think I'm the last speaker of this session, and then we will have a discussion session. And I don't want to waste my time with 5 minutes to spare to me in this session. So actually, I am expected to speak today on a different topic and different side on a project, that will perhaps become even more meaningful and important if we assume that Israel will stop the attacks and then an agreement, ceasefire, will be reached maybe today or tomorrow. I say this is important because it is a crucial initiative and effort against such a crisis in international system and international law. As I said, this is I'm going to talk about a project called Gaza Tribunal, and this Gaza Tribunal initiated last year, and the president of the Gaza Tribunal project is, as you know, Richard Falk, emeritus professor and former special rapporteur on Palestine on United Nations. And I am the executive director or coordinator of these Gaza Tribunal projects. As you know, the idea of establishing such a people's tribunal to judge civil human rights violation and or war crimes is not new. That there are too many others, and the inspiration for people's tribunals originated with the Russell Tribunal, established in 1966 by British philosopher Bernard Russell and French philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. And the original Russell Tribunal critically examined the US military intervention in Vietnam at that time and set a precedent for subsequent people's tribunals. Although unofficial and lacking enforcement power, the Russell Tribunal sought to hold those in power accountable by mobilizing public opinion, especially at that time, because, as you know, that at that time there was no kind of media outlets or social media such as. And after the Russell Tribunal, this model expanded globally, addressing various human rights violations, like in Latin America or Philippines, Korea, or Iran, or in 2000s, Iraq War Tribunal, the beginning of the 2000s, and the last one is Uyghur Tribunal. But the Gaza Tribunal, which will lead this, is set rather differently than earlier models, and it is not structured strictly to mimic judicial institutions. As you know, there is ongoing genocide, and at least two important international courts have Gaza on their agendas. As you know, the first one was in 2023, the South Africa's application to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, under the rules of 1948 Genocide Convention. And the second one, also, as you know, the initiative has been taken by the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, recommending the issues of an arrest warrant against the leadership of Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and the Defense Minister Yoav Gallant. I think both of these initiatives or court process is very important. But considering these ongoing court proceedings, the Gaza Tribunal is structured to be flexible, faster, and designed to serve more comprehensive investigation than typical strictly legalistic inquiries by international courts. It is a little bit different. And the Gaza Tribunal has been planned to consider the wider impacts and complications of Israeli behavior additional to the genocide, not only limited to committing genocide in Israel, but also the other issues. And the people's tribunals are typically organized by activists, academics, intellectuals, and also NGOs with strong engagement from affected societies. And the Gaza Tribunal is also a global independent project, free from any direct or indirect influence or governments, active politicians, and diplomats. The structure of the tribunal consists of small steering committee, which I'm also the part of the steering committee. And then the steering committee chaired by president, and that is responsible for administrating the entire things of the Gaza tribe, the projects, and also some, advisor policy council and some other related council, civil society, media, like that. And all these members at large invited to take part of based on their expert knowledge of Palestine issues and some, international law or international, politics issues. And the Gaza Tribunal seeks to cooperate. The second important thing that the Gaza Tribunal try to cooperate with reliable and influential international media, especially those operating in the global south. So far, as you know, the mainstream Western media played either no role in delimiting the crimes of Israel, or some even deliberately manipulated public opinion in ways detrimental to the Palestinians, and advantageous profiting from Israeli criminality. Unfortunately, we just witness all kind of, the media, especially the Western media, role of this Gaza genocide. And the Gaza Tribunal, thirdly, the Gaza Tribunal is aiming to collect evidences, especially visual materials that document the most serious violations. And one of the other objective of the Gaza Tribunal is to contribute the formation of an accurate and comprehensive historical record of the genocide, and to provide such a guidance for kind of future legal proceedings. And maybe we can say finally, while these the judgments of these people's tribunal are not legally binding, there is no kind of legally binding any kind of these kind of initiatives, or directly enforceable, but they carry symbolic and moral weight, often influencing public opinions or policies, or triggering further legal action that could contribute to reaching a just, and a durable peace all around the world, not only in Palestine. Maybe they can model, for other kind of, important crises, like, maybe, for example, for Syria, or some other, similar international global big crisis. I think my time is ended up now. Thank you so much for listening. Maybe we can discuss more for some, kind of stage, or further steps for the Gaza Tribunal, if you need more, kind of information or further considering.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kuroglu. We do have about 10 minutes for a quick round of discussions. In fact, questions have been sent in. The questions are to the panel in general, but I think this question would be more, I think, relevant to Dr. Jabeeri and Dr. Dawood Abdullah, which is, how do divisions between Hamas and Fatah impact the effectiveness of Palestinian resistance and diplomacy? I will put these questions, I'll cluster them if the panel allows, it'll just be easier. And the second question is, how is the United States' stance on Israel influencing its global partnerships, particularly with countries in the global south? And to this, how do you see the recent developments, obviously in Palestine, reshaping the Arab-Israeli peace process in the short and long term? I know that certain speakers did touch upon it, but if maybe you could elaborate. So these three questions, and then we do have a question for Dr. Ahmed as well, and for Dr. Jaffer. But Dr. Jabiri, would you like to go first?
Thank you very much. Can you remind me of the second question because I didn't pick it up?
Right. The second question is more on, how is the United States stance, obviously, on Israel and its backing influencing its global partnerships, particularly with countries in the global south?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. The first question in relation to division, we need to understand it within the settler colonial policy for the last 75 years. So we don't think about it in terms of just like there are two factions of Palestinians, they are fighting over something. They are fighting over the vision of the continuity of the struggle of Palestine. And this is not division. This is basically a disagreement in how the Palestinian struggle and resistance should conduct itself, whether it should conduct itself in relation to a peace agreement, which is Oslo, that has been broke completely by Israel for the last 30 years. There is nothing of the pace of the Oslo agreement peace remaining now because it has completely been violated. And the second one, whether we as people, as Palestinians, should embrace the strategy and policy that put for us, which is to accept our fate of being with no rights, basically, with and defenseless, and accept that we shouldn't have and should not ask for any rights, whether of self-determination, of freedom, or anything, and only to get what the United States and Israel have in mind for us. So this is not a division in terms of that people are fighting so in other civil wars or in other conflict. This is basically a division that is made based on settler colonial context. So we need to understand it from within the settler colonialism and what has it done to the Palestinian political and social fabric in general. And this will continue as long as there is a party which is the Palestinian Authority right now, think that they are Palestinian are weak and they should take whatever they are given. And there is a Palestinian, which is the majority of Palestinian people, that they think they have the right to exist as people, and they have the right to their freedom, and they have the right that is stipulated in the international law. So they are not asking for something that is outside of the law. We are asking about our rights as people to exist. And as long as this vision continues, the Palestinian people, and that's why you see it in the even if Hamas was defeated, Fatah was in the context of settler colonialism and occupation, defeat and victory is completely different. But we are using here based on what defeat means in the context of Israel. Israel understanding of defeat of Palestinian is to erase their history. And that's why you see the destruction of the archive, destruction of universities, destruction of schools, destruction of everything existing, whether it's a human or non-human in Palestine. So do you either you accept this or you resist it? And the Palestinians have said this from the 1922, but nobody is listening, that we are not accepting this. So this erasure of Palestinian existence on the land of Palestine would not end. So this kind of divide based on the divide and rule policy, what's going on between Palestinian faction is based on that. So we don't understand it outside of the context. In regard to the normalization in the region, they can do normalization. And it seems, as Dr. Amin said, that it's going to happen despite everything. And this is kind of unbelievable for many Arabs and Palestinians who witnessed 15 months of continuous genocide and destruction in Gaza and elsewhere in Palestine for something like this to happen afterwards. But it's going to happen, but it's happening at the level of states. And normalization, when it happens at the level of states, wouldn't be sustainable. And we see this in the case of Egypt after how many years, over 4 decades of normalization between Egypt and Israel in the Camp David agreement, and still at the level of people, there is no normalization. We see it in the case of Jordan. Since 1994, the Wadi Araba agreement, and at the level of people, there is still no normalization. So even if it will happen, and I think if there was a percentage of that normalization between people and Israel would happen before, after the 15 months of genocide and what people have watched, this would be impossible. So at the policy level, this might go as it is planned before, but it would never achieve its goal. It will never be implemented, and normalization only successful when it's conducted by people, when people come to conclusion that this something should happen. And as long as that does not happen, it means the situation would continue as it is, even if their governments are. And what they have done to the Arab regimes, the US policy, what has done to the Arab regimes, like this level of weakness, they have been weakened to an extreme level where people have lost all the trust, where you have now clearly see that how corrupted they are and how weak they are and how distant, again, as I said before, distant they are from what the people want. And this basically will weaken any normalization or any policies of the Arab regime. So basically the first and second question, they correspond with each other in terms of the US has actually undermined the regime. But in doing so, they have undermined their capacity to kind of enforce anything in the practice, at the reality, at the lived reality of the normalization. It's far beyond kind of all of the Arab regions, that people in the Arab region, that something like this would happen and be acceptable. I hope I answered these questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Before I come to Dr. Abdullah, I wonder if I could just bring in Dr. Amin to this point that Dr. Jabiri has made, that while countries in the Middle East, their leaders might be on board for this normalization, the common public or the domestic audience is not supporting this. So keeping this in mind, then where do we see this normalization process when you don't have your domestic audience supporting this particular cause? I wonder if you could just add to this, Dr. Amin.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think I have something in mind to say here, is that related to the gap which is happening between the people and the governments, because this is actually very true. And it will create, but you know what? The Israelis are playing on this dynamic, and they are trying to impose the idea that we are actually normalizing with the governments and the people are kind of okay, or at least they understand it or they know about it. And the Israeli always leaks stuff like that to the press. They create problems domestically for the governments in the Middle East, and they use it. They use it in their favor in order to continue with this process. Where this will lead, it will lead to nothing. It will lead to more troubles for governments which will pursue this endeavor. It did not clear yet. It is not shown clearly yet in the Gulf, for example, but it is early to decide. But like as the doctor before me spoke, and 40 years of cold peace between Egypt and Israel, and no normalization took place on the level of the people, although we have economic relations starting 2005 with the quiz deal and then the natural gas deal and so forth. But on the people level, because what does it mean to bring the people on the table? It means legitimacy, and nobody, at least I would say, I wouldn't say nobody, but I would say the majority of the people in the Middle East will not give you legitimacy with an occupation, colonial occupation, which have problem in defining its borders after 75, 76 years of establishing their state. So I don't think that there is a possible people-to-people normalization. The experience we are seeing in the Emirates, for example, is yet to be seen. I hope that there was somebody from Emirates in the panel who can speak about that. But like generally speaking, I wonder how this will develop because knowing the Gulf, that the Gulf already have so it's like a mosaic of societies. Like lots of people from different countries are already in the Gulf, so they know how to coexist and live together. But the idea with the Israelis is not to coexist or live together. The idea is legitimacy and to give them okay to be in the region. And this, I'm personally speaking, I don't think that this is going to happen anytime soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Abdullah, if you could also please add in, also, we don't have a speaker from the UAE, but, you know, the relations are already there, as Dr. Mutamir has mentioned. I wonder if you could give your 2 cents on that too. Thank you.
Well, there were two questions, the one on Hamas and the PA and Palestine Liberation Organization. I think the departure between the two has to be the Oslo Accords, which in effect created a security apparatus in the occupied West Bank and Gaza to serve the interests of Israel. And this has, from the very beginning, created a rift and the inability of the two parties to work together effectively. There were several attempts at agreements in Cairo, in Mecca, and Doha, and elsewhere. But none of these really stuck because the Israelis and their supporters have designated Hamas as a terrorist organization and vowed not to accept or work with a Palestinian Authority of which Hamas is a part. I mean, even to become a member of the PLO, has been vetoed by Israel and the Americans. So Hamas has been demonized, and attempts have been made to delegitimize the movement, even after they won the elections in 2006. And the attempt to subvert, the results of that elections is well documented. But the defining factor, the decisive factor in the whole thing of the relationship is the role, the security role, the coordination between Israel and the PA, which we see has reached its climax now in the West Bank camps of Jenin and Tulkarem, where the PA is actually fighting against the resistance in these parts. So this is a recipe that does not bode well for national unity. But let me just put that aside and go quickly to the other issue of the American in the global. So their status, they have been discredited, thoroughly discredited. I mean, last week you had the Congress actually voting to impose sanctions against the International Court of Justice. It's an absurdity and a travesty in towards what we call the rule of law. That a country could actually think that it can impose sanctions on the internet. This court is a court set up with the sanction, with the approval of the United Nations. And now the Americans, because these war criminals are being indicted, they have decided to move against them. So their status in the global south have been discredited thoroughly. And this is why countries like South Africa, Malaysia, and Brazil and elsewhere, are taking things into their own hands. And the overall impact of this is that it creates a fertile ground for the growth of a more multilateral international system. The days of unipolarity is fast coming to an end, thanks to the policies of the United States. You see, so sadly, with regard to the International Court of Justice, even its president, Tomoka Akan, she said that the existence of the court is now threatened. They have been threatened with all measures of sanctions and bodily harm, the accounts, the bank accounts have been, threatened with closure or being frozen. So I think, the policies of the United States has begun to deliver its fruits, as we say, the chickens are coming home to roost, in the sense that what they have sown, in terms of injustice and upholding injustice and apartheid in Palestine, is now delivering a rejection, in the global South.
Thank you. Just quickly, I have just one question for Mr. Emmett before we wind up. And this is a question that's come in from one of our participants, and that is that what potential does Turkey see in using its potential leverage, if at all, mostly economic, on pressurizing Israel on this particular issue? Is there any scope in that aspect? Briefly, if you could just respond.
He or she is asking within the Gaza Tribunal projects or independent?
No, I mean
No.
Turkey's overall,
Okay.
relationship with Israel.
As you know, many people criticizing the role of the Turkey, the position of the Turkey with Israel. They have some, traits with Israel. Even, Turkey government denied, we don't have any kind of, economic relations with Israel. But yeah, I think it is a very complicated issue because in one part, Turkey tried to make something for the for the solution for the Israel and Palestine issue, but on the other side, the own economic conditions and some problems. The Turkish government doesn't want to cut off all kind of economic relations with Israel government, and they are still try to still remain make some trades with some companies or with government with Israel. I think after the ceasefire or some permanent such agreements with Israel and Palestine, I hope Turkey will continue to make some trades with Israel government because the Turkish government has some to them bad experiences to criticize some big powers or regional powers, even if they don't have good economic conditions within the Turkey, they don't want to have some crisis with Israel or US or some other big powers, especially economically. I think they will stay on remain the economic relations Turkey and Israel.
Thank you. Well, we do have many, many questions, but I think we are running out of time. It truly has been a very insightful discussion, and obviously this needs to be continued. Before we conclude, I would like to request Ambassador Khalid Mahmood, who's the Chairman, Board of Governors, Institute of Strategic Studies, for his concluding remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. First of all, I want to express my great appreciation for MEMO in collaborating with ISSI to organize this seminar. As we have heard scholars from different parts of the world, it's quite clear that the world is facing a polycrisis. Active conflicts are raging in Ukraine and Middle East. And there is looming conflicts in the South China Sea over Taiwan. Non-traditional conflicts are aggravating with the rise of emerging new technologies. Terrorism and Islamophobia are still alive. And this is all happening under the overall arching contestation between big power contestation between China and the United States. And it is against this background that we today considered the situation prevailing in the Middle East. I won't go through what have already been covered by the distinguished scholars, but I agree that these developments in Gaza particularly have brought the issue of Palestine to the forefront of the international conscience. Of course, what's happening there is a genocide which is attested by ICJ, ICC, humanitarian, human rights, international bodies. And in all this, I think the role of the United States and the other Western powers has been that of an accomplice who have been providing all the wherewithal to Israel to pursue this genocidal course. And I think the response of the Islamic world, the Arab world, has also not been very edifying. And then there have been distractions, as I said, war in Ukraine and situation in South China Sea, and now the developments in Syria. So it looks that prima facie, Israel is under no pressure to stop its genocidal extermination of the Palestinians. And with the incoming of Trump administration, the situation looks apparently quite bleak. On the other hand, I think the sentiment of the Arab street, the world public opinion, tells a different story. And I'm quite certain that the sentiment of normalization with Israel has no scope in the present circumstances. So apparently the situation for the Palestinians may not be that sanguine, but I think we have reached the tipping point. Because what's involved here is the right of self-determination of the people of Palestine, who under Israeli occupation are struggling to realize their right, as sanctioned by the United Nations Charter, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenants of Civil and Political Rights, and so on. I think what's clear is that the present international order is not serving the interest of the international community. And there is bound to be an overhaul of this international order. And here we have a competing vision of international order espoused by China, which is based on win-win cooperation among all states, big or small. So we remain quite confident that ultimately it is the people of Palestine who will, inshallah, succeed in realizing their right to self-determination, which has all the sanction of international law and morality, and support of the international public opinion. So this conversation today has been very useful, I think, in highlighting in some of these points which I've referred to, and it will help in clarifying what is really involved in all this and what needs to be done to redress this situation which cannot hold on for any longer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of today's webinar. It has been a really constructive and engaging discussion. In no particular order, I would once again like to thank all our speakers, Dr. Jaberi, Dr. Dawood Abdullah, Dr. Amin, Dr. Hakpana, Ambassador Malikiza, and Dr. Kuruglu for joining us. Thank you so much. Take care.